Ever since this game first got released and all the leaks came out, and most people were curious about who would be in the game in this new sequel.
Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl 2.
It is nice to see some of these characters finally get in that are deserving of a spot, like El Tigre and underrated characters in older shows that they really gave a nod to, for like the Angry Beavers and many others that I wanted to see. And I was one of the ones who wanted to see Plankton get into the game, and most people were saying, kept on saying, well, he's too small, he'll never make it in, he doesn't stand a chance. And I thought he could play just as he is in a mech, and being able to have Karen alongside of him as part of his moveset, and he does. When we take a look at this roster, there's not a lot of people that's happy with this roster, and I think the roster itself is the main source of why most people are probably not playing the game and not even continuing to play the game and wanting to make the purchase for this game. So I wanted to remake the roster and change it up a little bit, and something that I wanted to do differently, and I'm gonna just be running through some of the modes. Maybe I will, but I think I'll just keep it on just the roster itself for all the playable characters. When you get this game, everybody's already unlocked, excluding the campaign, because in the campaign you actually have to unlock it's different. It's just the way I wanted it. But the one thing I don't like is how everybody's available right at the start to play in the battle mode. But at least it's different for the campaign when you start playing this game. All the stages are here, and every different variations and more. But let's just pick a random stage. I'll go to one of my favorites that I always wanted to see, Miracle City, to get added into this game for some kind of representation. So all the characters are all here, and one thing I want to do and get into for this video is I want to list all the characters that I put in my roster, and I'm also going to have timestamps because I'm going to go by each show because I have different things I want to say. You don't have to watch the full video. You can also chime in and take a look at the roster from the description of the video if you want to, if you don't want to listen to my reactions and how I end up picking these characters and why, and just the different changes that I wanted to make to this roster. I'm cool with this roster, but I'm surprised with all the cuts and the fact that we don't have two Ninja Turtles that I'm going to be able to get into. We only have two Ninja Turtles. We only got 2 of the 4, and I thought all of them would be able to make it in. I thought everybody would be able to get into the game. They were going to expand and add in other characters that I wanted to see, like Ember, for example. But I'm going to start with each individual show, and one thing I want to bring up real quick before I get started, I was thinking about this game called Nickelodeon Kart Racers 3. If you played it, some people might play it if you play racing games out there. I thought that they would add certain characters to this roster, and I'm going to be able to get into it. But when it comes to Nickelodeon Kart Racers 3, Nickelodeon Kart Racers 3 had 42 playable racers. That's a lot of good characters and a lot to choose from. And that's what I was expecting to see from Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl 2. I thought the roster was going to be bigger and better, but that was my goal, putting this roster together and changing it up a little bit, and just picking other different reps and other characters that I wanted to see added to beef up the roster. That's what I wanted to do for this video and for my own roster, to make it bigger and better. And I would say I got a good 44 characters, so I went a little bit overboard. I don't know, maybe some people might say it with this roster. What do you guys think? If you just take a look at the list, of course. Now we'll be talking about DLC today and so much more, but I went over the 40. I went just plus two additional characters in comparison to Nickelodeon Kart Racers 3. How is it that that game has more characters that's playable and accessible than Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl 2, when this is supposed to be a sequel and it's supposed to have more? The player would expect more from a sequel. They would expect more playable characters that they never really thought that they didn't have from the first game to be playable, like we have right here with Jimmy Neutron. But there were changes made. Decisions were made, and not everyone was a fan of Grandma Gertie. Hate to say it. As great as she is, and I like playing as her, and I didn't have an issue with her getting into the game. But that was my goal for this sort of roster, and just building it and trying to make it bigger than what we have right now. Because I think with this roster that I came up with, I think it would interest the player and they would want to check it out. And some of these characters I wanted to lock behind certain requirements, so not everybody's available to play right then and there. The player can just be able to unlock them outside the story and do more for the game and have more to do. It has a good amount of stuff in this game, but you know, if you're not just focused on the online, the campaign has a lot to explore. So the first show that I want to get started with is SpongeBob, and for this base roster, 44 characters I'm going to get into, and I'm going to get into individual shows. So you can watch as much as you want, just like I mentioned before. It's just going to be different timestamps. So if you want to hear me talk about certain shows, it'll be shared for you guys in the description to click on and listen into, so you're not just trying to find and hope that you hear about a certain character or more, if you're looking for a specific character, that is. So we're going to start with SpongeBob. I do like the costumes and everything that they made. They did all the different ultimate costumes. I did get the ultimate edition. I got granted access to the ultimate edition. So I got the Quizzer skin. It's just amazing. Very well done and created. Just with the one of my favorite episodes. It's one of my favorites. There's so many great episodes of the SpongeBob series. So let's start talking about this. So the SpongeBob reps I wanted to begin with. You can't have a Nickelodeon game or a Nickelodeon crossover game without SpongeBob. So I started, for my SpongeBob characters, I went SpongeBob, Patrick, and then one of our missing characters, one of the 11 cut characters, Sandy. I brought back all the characters, the cut characters, just to, you know, spoil the roster up real quick. I brought everyone back because I felt that the developers didn't have to cut any characters. They could have brought everybody that they had from the first game to be moved over into this roster, and then they can build upon it from there, where the roster gets bigger and it has more variety. So I had SpongeBob Patrick, I got SpongeBob Patrick, Sandy, Squidward, of course, and then Plankton. So I got 5 characters for SpongeBob. I will be getting to Mr. Krabs later on. But those are my first 5 characters to get in, because I would really like to see Plankton and Squidward make it in as the 2 additional new characters to join the base roster. So 5 SpongeBob reps. Now we're going to move on to the TMNT. This is something that really bothered me the most, and I was most shocked about as far as the character changes in this roster, is the fact that we only have 2 of the 4 turtles. They did the same thing that they did from the first game. Leonardo and Mikey was the only 2 playable TMNT, or the 2 playable turtles in the first game, if you played it. And then from the sequel, they did the same thing, but it's the other 2 turtles, which I was afraid they did. They would do what they ended up doing in the first, right then and there. Raphael and Donatello are the only 2 playable TMNT turtles. They're the only playable turtles, while Leonardo and Mikey got shoved. They're nowhere to be found in this game. You can find them in different, sort of, in a particular part of the game, as far as this the campaign, where you get to a certain point and you can spot them. And there's even some references that I ended up finding once you start playing this game, that the developers was awesome enough to include lots of different hidden secrets and references and different shout outs that they give to some of these characters. And Sandy was one of them too, that I ended up discovering with SpongeBob. A Sandy reference, and then a shout out to Leonardo and Mikey from a Raphael reference and a Raphael voice line reaction. But I'm surprised that they did. I wonder what goes into making these decisions when it comes to the TMNT, because the Ninja Turtles has always been a big part of Nickelodeon. So I was really shocked to see this. And now it's only Donatello and Raphael to represent the 2 turtles, and then April got to stay. But let's get into the characters I chose for the TMNT series even more. I went Leonardo, Mikey, Donatello, and Raphael, all 4 turtles, to make their return in this roster as deserved, and they should be, as they should have. All 4 of the turtles should have been in this game. And then I kept April, the Channel 6 news leader, of course. And then my change was Shredder. I'm going to get ready to explain to you guys. I put Shredder in my new roster, in this new roster. But I kept Shredder as a boss. But he can be unlocked by defeating him with all 4 of the TMNT members. So when you go against Shredder, the unlockable requirement, I thought this would be something cool. You can unlock Shredder if you beat him with all 4 turtles one-on-one. So you gotta encounter him. You gotta beat him with Leonardo, Mikey, Raphael, and Donatello. I thought that would have been a cool little unlockable requirement for the developers to do. But I put it in my own roster, and I included and brought Brad Shredder himself. Even though he has the role of being a boss, he can still be able to be a playable for those who love to play in that Shredder. Because I'm one of the ones who like playing him from the first game. So he could still be a boss, but unlockable as a TMNT. So another additional, let's see, we got 4 turtles, and then we got all 4 of the turtles. We got April and Shredder. That's 6 characters. 5 reps for SpongeBob, 6 reps for TMNT, because I think they both deserve to stay in. And I personally went and cut April because I think she's a really good fighter and a really good character. Some people probably would argue Casey Jones, or maybe probably sliding in a villain like Dr. Stockman, Crane, and what have you. But I'm going to get into those other TMNT reps later on too. So I went with those. All 4 turtles, April O'Neil, that you guys can see on the screen. And then Shredder being a playable, but he's still a boss that can be a unlockable character from an unlockable requirement. Now it's time for the Loud House. Moved on. And Lucy Loud being the only Loud House rep, I think this was really different. This is also something that was a really crazy surprise. Lincoln Loud is one of those icons, just like SpongeBob for Nickelodeon. So I'm surprised they moved Lincoln into a background stage. He's part of the background of the Loud Castle. You can't see him in the background, but you have to actually play the stage to really see him. Bottom window, middle window, you're gonna see him pop out. But he's going to eventually be a playable anyway because Mr. Krabs is DLC, which is awesome. So he opens the doors back up for him. So just click on it. But Lucy Loud being the only Loud House rep, I think this was something really crazy too. And I think Lincoln Loud should be a part of this too. So I put him back into my roster, of course. I went Lincoln Loud and Lucy Loud coming back and making a return for my roster for this game as the 2 current Loud House members. I'm definitely going to share more soon. But those are the 2 Loud House characters that I got for now, and I brought them back along, of course, with Lincoln Loud. Now I'm going to jump into Invader Zim. Zim is the only rep from his show, and I believe we deserve to have at least another rep from Zim's show. And I selected Dib. So I put Zim and Dib to represent Invader Zim for this game. For this roster, for the Zim reps. Then, of course, I had to keep the Angry Beavers. I wasn't going to cut them because they deserve to be in. They're a 90s rep. Old school cartoons, old school Nicktoons that I would love to see in this game. This game needs more of the old era. The old Nicktoons era is not getting the spotlight like that. But at least they made it possible to get Daggett and Norbert into this game. And I'm glad that they got in as a perfect duo. Just an all new show to get represented. Now Garfield, I brought him back. Of course, I wouldn't get rid of him, but I also added another Garfield rep that you guys are going to hear about later. I didn't put the Garfield, another additional Garfield rep for the base roster, but he's going to be in for now. And then I did something a little bit different from My Life as a Teenage Robot with Jenny Wakeman. I didn't want to have her come in solo. I added in Queen Vexus, her nemesis, who's always chasing her down and trying to get her to join the cluster prime or join the cluster. Queen Vexus deserves to be in this game as a base roster character. So 2 reps to represent My Life as a Teenage Robot. Vexus is not DLC for my roster. I put her as a base roster as an additional rep to go alongside of her to go head to head. Rocko's Modern Life, he's another solo rep or a single rep. I put him back into the game, of course. And then it's time for the Hey Arnold series. It's time to talk about the Arnold situation. I think Arnold deserves to be in this game just as much as Gerald. The besties going at it and battling out. And of course, I wanted to keep Grandma Gertie. So for our Hey Arnold series, I went ahead and put in Arnold Shortman because I think they can work. It's not about, oh, his head is too big. It's got all these different characters. Look how big El Tigre's head is. Giant heads and all. They can definitely make it work. How did he get into Nickelodeon Kart Racers 3 as a playable? He's been in all the Kart Racers games with his giant football head. Get his giant football head bigger than almost the car. Know what I mean? So I think he has a chance to even be a playable fighter, especially with the potential that Gertie basically taught him the martial arts. He would be dangerous. So I think he would still be cool to see. So I put him in it. So my Hey Arnold reps is Arnold, Gerald, and Grandma Gertie. And also, I also brought back Helga. So Arnold, Gerald, Helga, and Gertie are my 4 reps to represent Hey Arnold for the series. Remember Real Monsters? No one really talks about that. It's just another old school show like the Angry Beavers from the 90s. I love Real Monsters. I played the games. The Sega Genesis game from the 90s. Love that. Ablina is definitely a great character. I don't think people talk enough about Ablina. So I brought her back, who was also cut. And then on top of that, something I did differently, I put in 2 different Real Monsters reps. And I went with Ablina and Ickis for the base roster to represent the Real Monsters for this new character selection. Ren and Stimpy, of course they're here to represent Ren and Stimpy, of course. And then I also went with Powder Toastman to make his return. Take care of business, you know, for Powder Toastman. So 2 reps for Ren and Stimpy. I wouldn't have a problem with Waffle Woman, but I went with just Powder Toastman and Ren and Stimpy for now, for this roster, for the base roster. Avatar, The Last Airbender, Aang is the only one from his show right now. And the one thing I did differently, I'm curious to see what you guys think. For Avatar, The Last Airbender, I went with Aang, Toph. I gotta bring her back because we don't even have an Earthbender in this game. It's just so different. It's crazy. We got Aang up in here, Toph to make her return, and then I went with Zuko over Azula. And I'm gonna talk about the changes I made with Azula in a little while when I get into the DLC. That's what I decided for her, basically. I made Azula DLC, and I put Zuko in the base roster because he was already in Nickelodeon Kart Racers 3. Once they announced this game, I thought Zuko would be in the base roster guaranteed, and he would be able to finally battle and, you know, settle the score with Aang. But Azula is great. She's another great character, and she's powerful. She has lightning and fire, which Zuko doesn't have. So I'm all for Azula still being into the game, but I just moved her to DLC. So I want Aang, Toph, and Zuko to represent the Last Airbender for now. So I made a little change to Azula. The Adventures of Manny Rivera, he's solo for now. I just brought him and kept him. I always wanted him to be in the game for this new sequel. So I'm glad they went and got him and made it possible. Just need more shows like this that's underrated, you know. And then Legend of Korra, I didn't know who else to add for Korra's show. So of course I like using her from the first game. And not many people did like her moveset, but I did. The final patch changes and things like that. She's even greater in this game. Well, even better in this game. So Korra to represent Legend of Korra. And then I did some things differently and wanted to get more Wild Thornberries reps to double down. So I went Nigel, of course, Nigel Thornberry, and then I added Eliza Thornberry. Nigel and Eliza Thornberry to represent the Wild Thornberries show to join the base roster. Catdog to make the return. I wouldn't mind having the greasers, but I brought Catdog back. Now we're gonna move on to Jimmy Neutron. I feel like Hugh Neutron never ever should have gotten removed because they had the campaign. They fought so hard to get this character into the game, and he made it. When he finally made it into the first game, he should have already been an automatic slot for this game. He deserves that spot right off the bat because of that campaign. And even though he's part of the campaign, speaking of that, for the story mode, he deserves to come back. I would love to see this showdown, Jimmy Neutron versus Hugh. So my reps for Jimmy Neutron, I selected Jimmy Neutron, of course, Jimmy Neutron and Hugh, and then I also added Cindy Vortex because she is dangerous too. She's deserving to be in this game. This is a game for Cindy Vortex, and I don't see people talk about her and mention her. Maybe people just are not that big of a fan of hers, just with her skills and her fighter ability. Danny Phantom, well, of course he's been in the game. I kept Danny Phantom and Ember because I definitely wanted to see Ember in this game. I'm glad she made it in. She's one of my favorites to play. And then I did something different. As the third additional Danny Phantom rep, I made Vlad Plasmius playable and unlockable. So when you beat the story mode and complete it in full and get the true ending, you can unlock Vlad Plasmius and he becomes playable. Plasmius should have been a playable character. I understand he's the main antagonist and he's the main, what they say, big cheese, the main villain of the story. He should have been a playable, and that's something I was really hoping for this game. Great skins and all, with Danny Phantom and Ember, Vlad Plasmius definitely deserves to be a playable character in this game. He should have been unlockable, but in my roster, I made him part of it. Now we're going to move on to the Rugrats. Reptar is by himself once again. But in this case, I put in, it might be a little bit different. I added Angelica. 2 reps for Rugrats. Reptar and Angelica. I picked Angelica over Tommy. Some people might not like that. Tommy Pickles, I wouldn't mind. But I think this is a game for Angelica to go crazy with Cynthia. Reptar and Angelica tearing it down for the Rugrats reps. Nothing against Tommy. I wouldn't mind. Even though some people said Tommy was in that other Super Brawl, I haven't played it. And it won't even let me download it for some reason on the mobile store. It's just gone. He was a playable in that game, apparently, Tommy Pickles. But I went Reptar and Angelica. And that closes and maxes out the roster and completes my base roster with 44 characters. So just plus 2, just 2 additional characters over Nickelodeon Kart Racers 3 that have 42 playable racers. I went with 44 playable characters with some unlockables, with some of those characters like Vlad Plasmius and Shredder and things like that. I'm not sure what you guys think. That's the base roster. Now we're going to start talking about DLC, the future DLC characters from already represented shows and then in newer shows that I came up with. So I didn't want to stop there. The DLC that's coming out for the season pass, I don't think most people don't really like it because they were expecting new shows, and then we got 2 firebenders that we don't need. We're gonna have 3, and it's just gonna stack up. So I changed it. So I'm just gonna give you guys the list of DLC characters that I put in and added for this game, so you guys can be able to, check it out for yourself in a list if you want. Mr. Krabs is definitely a game changer. So of course I started with him. He's a background character, and most of those characters that's in the background, Lincoln Loud, Odie, and all the other characters that have different roles in this game, Mr. Krabs is a difference maker, and I always wanted him in the game. Anyway, it's gonna be fun to play as him. Hopefully he comes out this month, very soon. Mr. Krabs, Doodle Bob, he has potential. He doesn't have to be a skin or alternate costume, even though he could be. Make SpongeBob's body into like a little drawing made of pencil. But Doodle Bob has that magic pencil. He can definitely be dangerous on the battlefield. Man Ray, Dennis the Hitman for little additional SpongeBob reps. Jimmy Neutron, he deserves a villain in this game. Professor Calamitous. There's not a single Jimmy Neutron villain in this game. That could have been a boss. Professor Calamitous could come in and get added in as an update for a new boss. Ultra Lord for another playable. I would like to see that. I wouldn't have a problem with Sheen, Carl, and Jet Fusion looking like James Bond. Just so many different amazing reps for Jimmy Neutron. But Professor Calamitous I put in my DLC with Ultra Lord. I added 2 additional Garfield reps to it for John Arbuckle and Odie to represent Garfield and join him for this roster. Going back to the world of TMNT, they're going to have the most reps because they got 6 characters. But just I already named SpongeBob reps too that can join in, that could stack up. In the world of TMNT, I put Karai and Usagi because Karai and Usagi were new playable characters in TMNT Shredder's Revenge. So I thought they might do something like that in a similar light and consider them. Karai is a really good character, and Usagi to join the TMNT roster. And then instead of just having Rocksteady by himself, I did Bebop and Rocksteady together as a duo fighter for the another additional DLC TMNT rep. Don't put them solo and separate them. Bebop and Rocksteady should not be separate characters. They deserve to be to fight as a duo. And then I went into the world of Avatar for DLC, Avatar: The Last Airbender, and I moved, just I already mentioned, I moved Azula to do DLC as another additional fire rep to join her brother Zuko. And then I went with Suki. I moved Iroh. I don't have a problem with the general of the Fire Nation, but we already got Zuko and Azula should be the Fire Nation reps. I'll say it again. I think Zuko and Azula should be the ones representing the nation of the Fire Nation itself. So that's why I moved Azula to DLC and put in Zuko. So Suki and Azula for additional Avatar Last Airbender reps to get into the game. Let's talk about the Loud House real quick. To join the likes of Lincoln Loud and Lucy, I put Luna Loud and Lana Loud. I'm not sure how you Loud House fans feel about this. I haven't seen all the episodes. I wouldn't mind whoever they choose from the siblings. It could be Lenny or Lori. Some people might want to have some kind of preference. But I'm going to go Luna and Lana for those. So those are just the already represented characters for now. I could also just talk about, just slide in real quick. Rocko could have Heifer join him, and so much more. They can do Stalker from Danny Phantom. They got so many other options to get in. Harold could be in from Hey Arnold. Sid it just goes on and on. Donnie could be going wild for Wild Thornberries. Professor Membrane for Zim. Maybe one of the other XJ models could get into the game. Tommy, Waffle Woman. It just goes on and on. And more Korra reps for DLC. But now let's start talking about, we're going to wrap it up with new shows. This game needs a lot more new shows. We don't want to just keep stacking up on already represented shows that we already got so many characters of already. So many new shows I'm just going to run through. The Fairly Odd Parents, if they can make it possible, because he deserves, everybody wants to see Timmy Turner to get into this game if possible. It's their time to get him. I feel like Nickelodeon will push for Big Nate, so I put his show in. I think he'll be a lot of fun to play. Glitch Tats, Kappa Mikey, underrated shows like The Mighty Bee with Bessie that people don't talk about. Harvey Beats, Rocket Power, a personal favorite of mine. I want to see make it into this game. Tough Puppies, Kitty Catswell, Dudley Puppy, so much more. The Winx Club, and we kicking it all the way back. Kablam with Henry and June for a duo. How about that for a classic show? Going back to the 90s era. We need more 90s characters in this game. We already brought up Arnold, but these are newer shows. Kablam, Winx Club, we just already mentioned. Monster High, that's another show I think Nickelodeon will try to push for with Big Nate. Monster High. And then Rock, Paper, Scissors, and so much more. All their modern shows, Big Nate, Monster High, and then their newest show that recently came out, Rock Paper Scissors. Rock Paper Scissors. Things like that. It's such a good show. What you see what I mean? This is just all the DLC and new shows that can get in. I didn't want to keep on going on and on and on. But you got all these good shows. They got all the options in the world. You don't have to stop with solo reps and all this. You can get more from the characters from these shows. The season pass could have been a lot better. Mr. Krabs was a perfect choice, but then things got worse for the, just being honest. Some of the players out there in the community, they're only going to buy 2 of the characters. They have to get something better for the next pass. Hopefully we can get another one. Because Mr. Krabs and Zuko are going to be the main characters that are going to get the most sales. People don't want to rock with Iroh. People don't want to play just Rocksteady by himself because it's so different and it feels weird. So that's why I wanted to change it up. This roster is probably the main factor and the reason why people are just pulling back from the game. And that's why I wanted to make a different roster and make it bigger and better, because this roster should be bigger than what it is right now. And I am happy with the picks that they went. These are 2 of the characters I wanted to see. Some of the characters that made it in the game, I was hoping to be DLC in the first game. I thought Jimmy Neutron was going to be the next DLC and the next pack. I thought Queen Vex was just going to be up in the season pack or the next universe pack, that it was originally called beforehand. These packs can be filled up with all types of new shows, and even if they get a new rep, let's just get some of these other characters that don't have much of a rep. Not some of the same shows getting all the spotlight. There's so many shows that deserve it. If they got Angry Beavers, they can get all these other additional 90s reps that's missing. To kick it old school. They were around before some of these other characters existed. So they deserve a spotlight and some kind of love and support. Just give them a spotlight, even if it's just only one character. These shows deserve to be recognized. And Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl 2. That's what the game is. They're all-stars before these characters came around. You see what I'm saying? I just hope that they do more. If we can get more for that second pass. So that's why I wanted to make a full-on new roster and change up the shows, add in different reps that I think deserve more for the base roster, and then some of those other shows that's missing additional characters could get more for DLC. Plus we get new shows to get represented in the future, so there doesn't have to be a third game. You can just keep building up on what you have now from these modes and more stages, more bosses. Just like I mentioned, Calamitous, Professor Calamitous, and all these other iconic villains can be able to appear for new boss rush updates and appear, and then more mini games for updates. It gets better and better, and I want this game to continue to grow. But with this roster, I just thought it'd be necessary because people want to see the characters they always wanted, and they want to see more. This game should have had more for the roster. Let me know what y'all think of my roster. Whether you hate it, love it, however you feel. What would you change it? Would you cut any characters? I just believe I brought everybody back because they all should have been back into this game and returned. So hopefully they'll be able to get back in someday, maybe for a new DLC.